Hey guys, thanks for joining me and welcome to section 3. In this section, we will be covering specific coins in each chapter. And chapter 301 will be the almighty Morgan silver dollar. And each chapter we will cover the history, the cultural importance, key dates, and varieties of each coin. And these chapters will be broken up into 4 main parts. Part 1 will be the history of the coin, part 2 will be the design of the coin, part 3 will be the cultural and historical significance of the coin, and part 4 will be the mintages, the key dates, and the varieties. So let's get into it. To start, the Morgan dollar wasn't the first silver dollar minted. It was actually the 4th series in a lineup of silver dollar coins. Between 1794 and 1795, there was the flowing hair dollar. Between 1796 and 1803, there was the drape bust dollars. Between 1840 and 1873, there were the seated Liberty dollars. Between 1878 and 1904, and then again in 1921, the Morgans were minted. And between 1921 and 1935, the peace dollars were minted. Very few of the first 3 series were minted. Almost all of them were considered rare or low mint, but a lot of the last 2 series were minted, the Morgans and the peace dollars. In 1804, Thomas Jefferson directed the U.S. Mint to stop coining silver dollars to prevent them from being melted down and exported for profit. So they almost never saw general circulation before 1859. After the Comstock load, the Civil War broke out just 2 years later. So the first 3 series never had a chance. But I have seen some later seated half dollars with heavy wear on them, so some of them got general circulation, probably later on in the same kind of time span as the Morgan dollar. Also, the US population was quite low in the beginning, and the dollar was very strong. In 1776, the US population was only about 2.5 million. It didn't hit 50 million until 1880, and didn't hit 100 million until 1913, or 200 million into 1970. I hope you've been following along and you're familiar with the Coinage Act or the crime of 1873. If you haven't already, please go watch chapter 202. That chapter explains the history and the struggle of the demonetization of silver, which led to the creation of the Morgan dollar. But I will get you up to date with some of the info in this chapter. So in this chapter, I'll briefly talk about the crime of 73. So the Coinage Act of 1873 ultimately demonetized silver, formally pushing the U.S. toward a de facto gold standard, which became an official gold standard in 1900 with the Gold Standard Act. President Grant later said he would not have signed the Coinage Act of 1873 if he fully understood the ramifications. He was just following the financial trend of the time, which was to move the United States toward a more stable international currency based on the gold standard, but the crime of 73 destroyed his popularity. So the Bland-Allison Act of 1878 brought the Morgan dollar into production by requiring the U.S. Treasury to purchase and mint a specific amount of silver each month. The act was passed by Congress to override President Hayes's veto of the bill in 1878 due to concerns that the government bonds would be paid in less valuable silver dollars instead of gold. He argued that the act would devalue the currency, hurt public credit, and that paying off debt incurred under the gold standard with silver would be unfair to the bondholders. Despite the veto, Congress overrode it, and the act was passed into law. The law was a compromise following the crime of 73. It required the U.S. government to buy between $2 and $4 million worth of silver bullion each month to be coined into silver dollars. And so the Morgan dollar was born. Silver certificates were printed for the redemption of silver Morgan dollars at the Treasury and at banks. The Sherman Silver Purchase Act of 1890 required the U.S. government to purchase 4.5 million ounces of silver monthly, increasing the money supply to appease the free silver proponents, who were the farmers and the miners. It turned out that President Hayes might have been right about the whole situation, and by 1893, the Sherman Silver Purchase Act of minting Morgan dollars had depleted the national gold reserves and contributed to the Panic of 1893. It was repealed by Congress that same year. The Morgans minted between 1892 and 1896 feature a lot of key dates due to the Panic and repeal. So how did the purchase of silver drain the gold reserves? Well, it was the 1890 and 1891 Treasury notes. These are also called coin notes, and these are a type of paper bill issued by the United States government from 1890 to 1893 under the authorization of the Sherman Silver Purchase Act of 1890, with the denominations of $1, $2, $5, $10, $20, $100, and $1,000 notes. In an 1891 series, they added a $50 note and a $500 note that was never printed for circulation. The Treasury issued these notes to individuals selling silver bullion to the Treasury. Unlike other redemption notes like silver and gold certificates, the Treasury note stated that it was only redeemable in coin. This allowed the Treasury to fulfill the note's obligation in silver coin, gold coin, or both at the discretion when the note was redeemed. This flexibility allowed the Treasury some control over releasing gold or silver coins relative to the value of the two metals when they fluctuated. And that's how the Treasury notes of 1890 and 1891 drained the gold reserves, because most people would redeem them for gold coin. In the summer of 1893, Congress repealed the Sherman Silver Purchase Act, but the Bland-Allison Act was not repealed until the Gold Standard Act of 1900. So due to the Panic of 1893, there were a decrease in the amount of Morgans minted between 1892 and 1895, but the production never stopped. It just slowed down. Although the Sherman Silver Purchase Act was repealed, a separate act in Congress in 1895 directed the U.S. government to resume coining all of the silver that it had purchased throughout the Sherman Silver Purchase Act until it was completely used up. The Treasury still had a large stockpile of silver bullion that needed to be minted in the coins, so around February 1st, 1896, they continued and sped up the minting of Morgan dollars until all the excess bullion was used up, which was 1904. So the Morgan dollar was discontinued after 1904, but there was a total of 659 million Morgans minted between 1878 and 1904, and then another 85 million in 1921. During World War I, the United States passed the 1918 Pittman Act, which authorized the melting of 350 million silver dollar coins to sell to Great Britain as silver bullion at the fixed rate price of $1 per ounce to meet Great Britain's urgent need for silver bullion at the time. Britain faced a silver shortage after Germany caused a run on its reserves in India, which threatened their ability to pay for vital war supplies. The Pittman Act was a federal law sponsored by Senator Key Pittman of Nevada. Under the act, over 270 million standard silver dollars were converted into bullion, 259 million to the sale of Great Britain at $1 per ounce, plus mint charges, and the other 11 million for U.S. subsidy silver coinage like half dollars, quarters, and dimes. Between 1920 and 1933, under the Pittman Act, the same quantity of silver was purchased from the output of the American mines at the fixed rate of $1, so that the original 270 million standard dollars would be recoined. A provision of the Pittman Act required the U.S. to strike new silver dollars with the domestic mined silver to replace the melted coins. This is where the U.S. got the silver to mint the 1921 Morgan dollars and the peace dollars. Roughly 270 million of the classic Morgans were melted down. The U.S. Mint canceled the original Morgan dollar dies in 1910, which means they destroyed them. That was a normal practice back then. Since then, they started to preserve the dies after they canceled a coin. The U.S. Mint had to create a new set of dies when the production resumed in 1921. This explains why the 1921 Morgan dollars look a little different than the earlier classic issues. The Morgan dollar gets its name from its designer, George T. Morgan, who also designed the reverse of the Columbian Expo half dollar, the reverse of the 1916 McKinley Birthplace Memorial Gold Dollar, and a few patent coins like the $100 Gold Union that was never minted, the Schoolgirl Dollar, which about 12 to 15 exist, and the 1882 Shield Earring Dollar, with about 9 exist. Morgan was born in England and came to the United States in 1876. He was hired as an assistant engraver at the mint under William Barber, who died in 1879, then worked under his son Charles Barber, who died in 1917. Morgan became the chief engraver that year, 1917, and worked until 1924. He was growing old, and he died the following year. The profile on the obverse of the Morgan dollar is the Roman goddess Libertas, Latin for liberty or freedom. The Roman goddess and the personification of liberty. She became a politicized figure in the late Roman Republic. If you look at the gold coin on this page, you can see the profile of Libertas with the coronet on her head, like the Morgan dollar has, that crown on Liberty's head with the word liberty on it. You can see that that was on the coin from 103 to 111 AD, almost 1900 years ago, or a little over 1900 years ago, actually. And you can see the pole. That is the same pole that's holding the Phrygian cap on the seated Liberty dollars. You can also see that Liberty on the Morgan dollar is wearing a Phrygian cap. And that Phrygian cap, there's some confusion to the difference between a Phrygian cap and and a pileus. So here's a little bit of difference. So the Phrygian cap dates back to 1200 BC in modern day Turkey. So you can see it was a symbol of a foreigner, and you can see the kind of history. Well, 1,000 years later, the Romans copied the Phrygian cap with a pileus, but a pileus doesn't have the top like you see on a lot of U.S. coins and South American coins, and even French coins. The pileus was worn for freed slaves. And during the French Revolution and the American Revolution, the Phrygian cap became a symbol of freedom, but most people think that the Phrygian cap is Roman. Now, it is a Phrygian cap, but the Phrygian cap is Turkish or from Anatolia from 3,000 plus years ago. The Roman version was the pileus, but it is a Phrygian cap on the coin. But it is not Roman, it is Phrygian or Turkish or Anatolian. And around the rim, close to the denticles, that's what those little tiny dots are around the rim are called. You can see E pluribus unum, which means out of many one. And you can see 13 stars representing the 13 original colonies. And on the reverse, you can see United States of America and $1 going around the rim. And right below state of, you see In God We Trust. And in the center of the coin, you see the eagle. There is no name for that eagle. That type of eagle was never named. I guess you can just say it's the Morgan dollar eagle. But that eagle was designed from an actual stuffed bald eagle. And you can see that the eagle is holding a olive branch on its right and arrows on its left. It's facing us. So this tradition of the eagle holding an olive branch and arrows goes all the way back to 1782. And whichever way the eagle was facing, toward the olive branches or toward the arrows, dictated what mood that the country is in at that time. If the eagle was facing the olive branches, the country is looking for peace. If the eagle was facing the arrows, it was ready for war. There is one coin series where the eagle is facing the arrows, and that is the Drake bust dollars, and that was due to the French Revolution. The Americans were actually worried that the French Revolution was going to happen in the United States. So they have their eagle face the arrows to signify that they were ready for war in case it broke out in the United States. There is a reef going around the bottom side of the eagle, and the mint mark on the Morgan dollars would be right below the ribbon on the wreath. If there is no mint mark, then it is a Philadelphia mint. So the composition of the Morgan dollar is 90% silver and 10% copper. The weight is 26.73 grams. The actual silver weight is 0.7734 ounces. And a good way to remember that actual silver weight is to type it in a calculator and turn it upside down. It spells hello. That's a kind of a party trick for coin nerds as well. The melt on a Morgan dollar right now is somewhere between $38 and $41. I think it's actually approaching 42 today. The diameter is 38.1 millimeters and the edge is reeded, like most coins, but there's some coins that don't have a reeded edge, like the 20-cent piece. George T. Morgan used an actual person for the profile of Liberty on the Morgan dollar, and that person was Anna Willis Williams. She was a school teacher, and she did not like the fame. She didn't talk about a whole lot, and there's not a lot of knowledge about the rest of her life, other than her being a teacher and a philosophical writer and her being the model for the Morgan dollar. There were some states where the Morgan dollar circulated in everyday transactions more than others. One state was Nevada. Because of the Comstock lode, Nevada was the heart of the silver dollar boom. Carson City minted many Morgans that circulated locally through the miners and the residents, and you can even kind of track the population and economic growth and decline of the Nevada silver miners by looking at the Carson City Morgan mintages. Another state was California. During the gold rush, California's population exploded, and with its proximity to the western silver mines, it ensured that Morgan dollars were circulating regularly, especially in San Francisco where the mint was located. In Louisiana, the New Orleans Mint was a major producer of Morgan dollars. While a lot of Morgans sat in storage, a lot also extensively spread through the South, establishing a demand for the silver dollar. Wyoming was a lesser populated western state, and silver dollars were commonly used in daily commerce and gambling. Even into the mid 20th century, local economies relied on these coins, and it wasn't uncommon for people to receive a pocket full of silver dollars in their change. Like Wyoming, Montana was a western state with extensive mining activity and a developing economy, and Morgan dollars was a standard form of cash in saloons and everyday purchases. Even into the 60s, using a $1 banknote was considered unmanly in Western states. It was part of the Old West mystique. It was part of being a Western He-Man. The clankety clank of silver dollars in your pocket made you manly, says Wayne Miller, the king of the silver dollar. In Montana and other Western states, people didn't trust the government or its paper money and often accumulated Morgan dollars, sometimes in thousand coin bags. A federal bank branch in Helena kept Montana supplied with Morgan and peace dollars. In Nevada, where gambling was legal, casinos used them and kept them in circulation. In 1877, 1 year before the first Morgan dollar was released, the Silver King and the McCracken mine was discovered, and they were a significant producer of silver in Arizona, which was located near Tombstone, Arizona. And this helped played a role in spaghetti westerns and a lot of people making connections between Arizona and the Morgan dollar. Also, the people of Tombstone, Arizona and the surrounding area saw the Morgan dollar as a symbol of their prosperity in the silver industry. On October 26, 1881, the OK Corral gun battle between Marshal Virgil Erb and his brothers Wyatt and Morgan and their friend Doc Holliday and the Clayton and McLaury gang left Billy Clayton and the McLaury brothers dead, and Virgil, Morgan, and Doc wounded. Also, the 1881 S is a popular Wild West collector's piece because of the connection between the silver from Tombstone and the San Francisco Mint. Here's some other quick connections between the Morgan dollars and the Wild West. Wyatt Earp and Doc Holliday were said to gamble at the Silver Dollar Saloon with Morgan dollars. And it was said that sharpshooter Annie Oakley regularly would shoot holes through Morgan dollars, but she also shot holes through other various coins as well. In the 1994 movie Getting Even with Dad, an ex-con named Ray plans a coin heist at the PCGS building in San Francisco, but to his accomplice to help buy his own bakery. But this movie is like a 1994 version of Big Daddy, which came out 5 years later. He didn't expect his son Timmy to show up at his house in the middle of planning the heist. He also hides the coins on the rooftop of his apartment, which looks like actual scenes from Big Daddy. I know that if it's true and one movie copied the other, Big Daddy is the copycat, but I am partial to Big Daddy, so. Anyways, Timmy was being ignored by Ray and his buddies as they pulled off the heist. Timmy got his father's attention by stealing the coins and hiding them. And to get them back, his father would have to do a number of things in different places and take him all over the town, to parks, to museum, and do other stuff to kind of win him over. And they grew a fondness over and blah, blah, blah. You can watch the movie, but overall, the movie is like an expensive product placement for PGS. That's what I got to feel for it. Just like how Mac and Me is a product placement for McDonald's. But I've probably watched Mac and Me 10 times more than I have watched Getting Even with Dad. There was a 1960 episode of The Rifleman called A Case of Identity, where the character Arthur Wingate, played by Royal Dental, or Gramps from House 2, or Farmer Gene Green from Killer Clowns from Outer Space, is searching for his long-lost son and starts handing out silver dollar-sized coins. These coins resemble Morgan dollars, and the coins appear to be a little bit larger than actual Morgan dollars, suggesting that they're just oversized props. But the show's setting was in like New Mexico territory during the late 1870s, 1880s. So it's Hollywood High, but it's kind of an interesting episode. There's a 1993 episode of Seinfeld called The Puffy Shirt, where George's father, played by Jerry Seinfeld, I love him too, pulls out a silver dollar and asks George, "Have you ever seen a silver dollar?" Of course, George says, "Yes, I've seen one." Then later in the episode, in that scene, he says, "When I was 18, I had a silver dollar collection." You know, you hear the clapter and laughter, and he keeps talking with his mom, George does. Then his father butts in later. "I could have never brung myself to spend one. I have some kind of phobia." Then later he says, "I bet the collection's worth a lot of money today." Kind of funny. In the cartoon The Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy, in season 7, episode 5, Billy gets an A. I've heard that Billy tries to bribe his teacher with a hoard of valuable silver Morgan dollars to get a good grade, but I couldn't find anywhere to watch it, so let me know in the comments if you've seen that. Also, I'm pretty sure that you've all heard the Allman Brothers Band song Midnight Rider, and we all know the line. Also, Merle Haggard has a song called "Are the Good Times Really Over? I Wish a Buck Was Still Silver." Doesn't mention Morgan's, but I love that song. A lot of his other songs have long titles like that. He loved doing that. Those two songs, along with a lot of other songs I've came across, they mention silver or silver dollars, but don't elaborate what kind of silver dollars they're talking about. This is one of my favorite books I've ever read, and I recommend everybody should read it. And it does mention silver dollars a few times, but it doesn't say Morgan or seeded or whatever. And I have done a video covering this book. I didn't do a full book review, but I recommend you checking out this video here. Now on the key dates. So the first and most major key date that a lot of people think about, at least on the early Morgans, is the 8 tail feathers. And I've owned one. I sold it. I wish I didn't. It was also like high relief. But the 8 tail feathers Morgan was actually the very first design. It was changed to 7 tail feathers, and there are some varieties of 7/8. And the reason why it was changed from 8 to 7 is to be more traditional. And I've gone through some of the different eagle designs, and the flowing hair half dollars has 5 or 6, depending on which year, which variety. The drape dollar has 3 rows of 6. The seeded dollars are kind of hidden, and the Great Seal of the United States has 9. So next time you see one, count the tail feathers and pay attention to which way the eagle's head is pointing. One variety of the Morgans that I hate is the 1899 O. Every single time that I've gone through, and I've gone through hundreds, maybe over 1,000 Morgans, just raw Morgans, trying to look for a 1899 filly, which there's only like 330,000 of. But every time I get excited, I just stop for a second and I stare at the 1899 and I go to flip it over, and it's a damn O. Y'all know what I'm talking about. And we all know that proofs are rare, but the 1879 O proof is even more rare. There's only like 4 to 8 known, but it's so rare because usually the branch mints, like the New Orleans Mint, CC, whatever, don't make proofs. So that's why it's so rare. And all of the San Francisco Morgans from 1885 to 1889 are low mint. So watch those. So if you're going through a bunch of Morgan dollars and you see 1885 to 1889, look for an S. And that's because the Morgan dollar production shifted from San Francisco to Philly. So there was a lot less San Franciscos during that time. Plenty of O's though. There's some in all of the Morgans from 1892 to 1895 are key dates. Just if you see 1892 or 1895, somewhere between that, just grab them. And that was due to the panic of 1892. And the 1893 CC was the last year of the Carson City. Also, the 1899, 1899S are both rare, just not the 1899 O. And the reason why the mintage is so low on the 1899P and the 1899S is that the mint was prioritizing the production of other denominations and had less of a need for silver dollars at the time. And with the total circulation of the filly only being 330,000, it's the second lowest of the filly. The first lowest is, of course, the 1895, which doesn't exist, but some coin books do show prices for about good coins. And some other key dates is the San Francisco's from 1902 to 1904. Those are because that was near the end of the production for Morgan's, and I guess San Francisco just didn't get handed a lot. Another thing to look out for is VAMs, or varieties. In coin lingo, a VAM is an acronym for the last names of the catalogers, Leroy Van Allen and A. George Mallis. BAM. And BAMs or varieties are kind of like mint errors that happen during the die making process, where there's die clashes and other imperfections and double dies and things like that. Some of the most famous ones are the 1878 8-tail Crazy Lips, the 1887 Alligator Eye, the 1888 O Scarface, the 1888 O Hot Lips, the 1891 Double Ear, and the 1891 CC Spitting Eagle. There's probably a bunch more, so just keep your eye out for those. If you go on certain websites like PCGS, I think it is, they have a whole catalog that's insane. There's also some books on VAMs of varieties, and some varieties don't actually add any extra value, but they're just kind of cooler. And lastly, some of the most expensive Morgans to ever sell. A 1899 CC Morgan and MS68 sold for $881 million. And an 1895 O and MS67 sold for $575 million. And you can see the list here. You can see this is the top 10, so most of them are in the 80s or 90s. But you'll never see a Morgan dollar with the MS70 stamp. There's just none of them. None have ever been certified. Doesn't mean there's none out there. There's just been never any certified MS70 Morgans. That's kind of interesting. And lastly, I'll throw in for honorable mentions, the 1921 D is the only Morgan to be minted at the Denver Mint. So that adds a little bit more collectability. Well, I hope you liked this video, and please continue. Next, I'll be talking about the piece dollars, which are probably a lot shorter, but there are some mentions of it and TV shows and maybe some movies. I'll put all that in there, and I'll put some key dates and other stuff, just like I will with a lot of the other coins in the series. So if you like this, please click like, and if you haven't subscribed already, please subscribe. But let's go on to the next one.